Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make a custom paid time off tracker for your organization as according to the handbook. Let me show you what type of space we're working with today. My name's Rebecca Williams. I create special solutions specific to your needs. So here's my needs at my organization. Where I am, employees work Sunday through Thursday as opposed to Monday through Friday. There are going to need to be special calculations for that. Employees must work at least 6 months before they're eligible for vacation. Great. That means that we're going to need to track their hire date and make accommodations for that requirement. Full-time employees are allowed to use their vacation as of January 1, as opposed to having to wait till their anniversary date. There are special requirements that are going to be made in the system for that. We have different accrual rates based on your anniversary. In years 1 through 3, you're allowed to take off 12 days of vacation with a maximum of 3 Sundays. Years 4 through 15, you have a maximum of 15 days and a maximum of 4 Sundays. Years 16 and beyond, you get 20 days off, again a maximum of 4 Sundays. Obviously, there are a lot of different calculations that are going to go into that and how that works. Now, part-time employees, for their first 2 years of employment, are allowed to take off the amount of time that would be equivalent to a week's vacation for them. So, if they work 24 hours in a week, they are allowed to take off 24 hours of vacation for their first 2 years of employment. For years 3 and beyond, that number doubles. So the equivalent value of 2 weeks vacation. So that person who works 24 hours in a week gets off 48 hours of paid vacation time. Each person is allowed 10 days sick leave. This does not roll over. None of the vacation days roll over. So we want to make calculations to ensure that the system knows when we're requesting a day this year, that it no longer counts days that were requested for last year, that it automatically rolls over at January 1, and also that if somebody takes a request in advance of next year, that it is not going to deduct against their balance for this year. All of that is going to go into our calculations. For a sick leave, you get 10 days. Sick leave is allowed to be rolled over into short-term disability, not additional sick days, short-term disability. You're allowed to accrue up to 20 days of short-term disability. For part-time employees, their sick leave is the equivalent to 1 week of work. So again, if they are scheduled 24 hours a week, they are eligible of 24 hours sick pay. Now, there are a few things that my organization has in terms of general policies that we also need to ensure are being added to this process. So, we need to consider the fact that our policy states that you may only take time off in half-day increments or full-day increments. There's no playing around with I'm leaving an hour early and eventually at some point in time, my 120 hours means that I've gotten to leave work an hour early 120 days per year. None of that going on here. Half day or full day increments only. So our system needs to be able to handle those types of requests. All of the requests are viewed first by your department manager and then by HR to ensure that there aren't going to be too many different people from too many departments. We are a very small organization. We have approximately 20 people on staff. Having 4 or 5 different people out on the same day would bring a lot of our work to a grinding halt, as a significant portion of our workforce would not be available for meetings, for one-on-ones, anything of that sort. It's very important to us that HR has the final say on, hey, how many total people are out that day? Does that work for us? Are we going to be able to complete the tasks required of us? And if not, they make the determination based on who has seniority or what is the most pressing matter. We're going to want to include in our form where vacation requests can occur whether or not there's some specific pressing, urging reason why somebody needs off. Obviously, if you're being married, if you're going on your honeymoon, if you're graduating, if your child is graduating, anything of those are going to take a lot of precedent over somebody who says, oh yeah, I think I want to maybe go down to the beach one weekend this summer, and this weekend seemed like it was pretty clear on the calendar. So we need a way for people to request those days. We also need a way for our requests to be pushed from a direct manager to HR. The last major thing that applies from within our employee handbook is that we really want to be able to make it easy for these managers to see if an employee is out of their total days, and we don't want any days that would maybe be comped if they had to come in for a Friday or Saturday event. We host many events. If we're trading off and somebody gets to stay out for a Thursday in order to work a Friday or a Saturday, we need a way for the managers to be able to reflect that without it being deducted from somebody's employee vacation timelines. All of these things being said, I've put out some of our considerations here so that it's easy for us to reference as we do this build. However, let me take a minute to show you what this looks like in action. Now, I'm going to show you just a section of the actual working live version that I use, and then I'm going to take you out into a blank version where we can look at things in a little bit more detail. I warn you, this is going to look complex and scary. I promise you that I am going to make these steps as easy as possible. Here is a section of my sheet that tracks everyone's eligibility. This module is going to run two separate databases in order to determine eligibility and balances. This is the eligibility section. They're going to work together for this to track what is a person allowed to take and how many have they taken. They're going to need to use roll-ups and relations. Here's our hire date. We said it's very important that somebody is not eligible to take vacation until at least 6 months after their hire date. And we know that our vacation time accumulates as according to our hire date and work anniversaries. Therefore, you can see here that somebody who is being hired in 2 days is a full-time employee, which works out to 40 hours, but they have no vacation eligibility. And I do apologize, these are very small, but this is, again, my working copy, and at this point in time, I don't really need to look over this to understand what these are. I can move things around so that people can see them well. Feel free to put in any comments if there's anything that was unclear, and I'd be happy to explain further. But I can see how many vacation hours they have eligible to them. Obviously, this person has not been here long enough to accumulate time. This person is a part-time employee working 5 days a week. Now, the reason that works is because they're only working 4-hour shifts over those 5 days. It may be a little bit more than that on certain event days, so she does work out to 35 hours during the week, but the way she's still classified is as a part-time employee. She's eligible for 5 vacation days because her hire date was within 1 year. You can see this person's within 3 years, 12 days, etc., so on and so forth. You can see basically how these numbers work out as according to policy. Same thing with their number of eligible Sundays here. This person is not yet eligible for Sundays. They haven't been here long enough for that. We can see here as well that the sick eligibility is 10 days on average, except for however many part-time days you have. And then it goes on from there to essentially do all sorts of calculations to figure out how many days have you taken, how many days remain, how many of those days are from this year, last year, next year. Again, we want to make sure that when an employee goes to view their balance, they're only seeing balances for this year. It's not reflecting anything else, except in the case of that short-term disability rollover, which is calculated all the way here at the end. So, You can see here that we have our relation, which goes into the vacation management, that allows us to actually track which days are being used and how that deducts. And then I have here a tracker just to make it easier for the employee's sake of if they work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then I want them to be able to put in a request Sunday through Saturday if that's when they're going to be gone, and have it only deduct the 3 days that they actually work. They don't need to put in separate requests for Monday, for Wednesday, and for Friday. So I have a tracker here just for which days they work. That's up to you whether or not you want to do that. Your policy could be that each person has to request each date individually. That's absolutely fine. You would no longer have to include this. Again, a lot of this is going to be specific to my organization, but as you see it and as you learn the system, you're going to be able to understand what it is that you need to do to create your own handbook. You're also welcome to book time with me, and I will help you create this as needed for your organization. Let me back out of here. Let me go into this background section of our vacation management tracker. The way this works is that an employee can click a button to request time off. They would select their name, they would select any dates, whether or not this is a half day, whether or not this is vacation time or sick time, and they can enter the reason that they're taking off in order for HR to help determine whether or not that is a priority request. Then they have ability to enter this dashboard and see how much time have they taken off. Here is all of my historical time off. I've taken off last year and this year in order to do a variety of things. You can see here that I have bereavement, that there are days that are being comped, and that won't necessarily reflect. I took off the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th for additional bereavement time, and so that really should work out this year to 4 days. My only sick day was last year. If I wanted to view it on a calendar to remind myself when everything was, I could work backwards, find my time off. If I go directly to my balances, you can see that I'm eligible for 15 days vacation time based on my hire date. I have 13 days remaining. If I look back at that calendar, I'll notice, oh, look at that. That bereavement request for me went through Friday and Saturday. My work schedule is Sunday to Thursday. So you can see that it actually only deducted 2 days for me, which is what I want it to be able to do. I've not taken any Sundays, so all 4 of my Sundays are available to me. I've not taken any sick days this year. I can see next year that I'm still going to be eligible for 15 days. You did see that it's quite a long-term requirement in order to move up to that next tier, but for somebody who's on their 3rd year, it'd be great for them to be able to see that they're going to have additional days next year, which is why that's requested. And I can also see if I've requested any time for next year, just to help me with my planning. Maybe I'm already booked out for next year. Of course, as I'm making this video in May, that feels a little bit far. However, you never know. Maybe you're saving up for a big event. Maybe your family's been looking to go on this reunion forever. Whatever it is, certainly in September, this is a very helpful feature to have. All right, if I go back out to my vacation module again, let me show you what specifically this vacation space looks like without necessarily having all of the full names. Here I have access to see a full calendar of when everybody's vacation is set. I have vacation times set in green, and I have sick days set in yellow. And if a vacation is still outstanding on its request status, then it actually shows as gray, vacation or sick. You will find me frequently saying vacation to refer to all paid off time. Just be aware, it's a bad habit of mine. So, vacation days, paid time off days are set up such that if it has not been approved by either the manager or HR, then it will show as gray because it is still pending approval. Now, we have this all time off section. You're going to see that currently all time off is placed under me because the way the form is set up, you are required to have the form attached to somebody that allows the system to deduct from the correct person. And in this case of removing everybody's last names and everybody's person requesting, so this way I'm only sharing with you my information, that does mean that every single person's vacation wound up under me. That is why I have this duplicated and why we took a peek at the original database earlier, just to ensure that everything was working and you could see how all the calculations ran, as opposed to here, if you look at this, it's going to start looking very quickly like I am out of days. So, you can see the name of the request. I have an automation set so that when somebody submits the form, the request is simply named their first name and the request type, vacation or sick. You can see the request dates. You can see if there's an eligibility alert. This is something that I have set up so that managers can see immediately before approving or denying. Alert! This employee is beyond their total number of available days, or this employee is beyond their total number of available Sundays, because that is specifically mentioned within the employee handbook. There's calculations to how many days they've used and how many Sundays they've used. Unfortunately, these numbers are very far off at this moment because the system is trying to compensate for the fact that these are all different people, but they're also all attached to me. But you can see what type of request was made here. If I load more, we'll eventually get down to all of our sick days as well. You can see the reasons that people have for taking their time off. You can see approval status over here. Now, typically this would be connected directly to their manager. And what's great about that is I have an automation that states that when a person puts in a request, email their manager to notify them that there's a new request in the system that needs to be approved. And then another automation built off of that, that when a manager edits an approval status, it gets forwarded directly to HR and emails them saying there's a new request that needs final approval. Please review. Then we have here our relation field in order to attach it to a person's eligibility, so this way days are properly deducted. There's also a way to correct something so that it becomes a half day in the system, or mark it as gifted, which is what I use as my term for comp days. Now, I am the sole person managing this system, so that does not become confusing for me because I know what I meant, but make sure that whatever language you're using is going to be clear to your team if you're working with additional people. You can call most of these things whatever you would like, as long as you know what's happening. This does allow a days used. Unfortunately, being the only person attached in this person property right now, it looks as though I've taken 89 vacation days and 12 sick days, but it's a really helpful tool just at a glance to be able to see where people are when you're using the correct version of this. As of right now, it's not something that's necessary for you to use. It's very easy, a few seconds to add, so now we're just going to leave this as it is, and we can show you with our sample later how everything works out. So now that you've seen the generic, I will tell you that there are 2 additional views that I've created for my managers. My managers are able to go in and simply see, hey, who in my department is still pending approval. They can see specifically the calendar for their department, so this way they know if there are overlapping requests. They can also view the full time off calendar, so that way if there's a department that works very closely with one another, let's say event production and live stream media are 2 teams that work very closely together, it would be very beneficial for the events team to know if half of the production team and live stream team has taken time off this week, because it means that there's not going to be many people to live stream and cover their event. So it's super helpful for them to see who else is in or out of the building. Maybe it is more advantageous to allow an employee in event management to take that day off, as it's not like they'd be able to get that work done anyway. HR would make that final determination as to whether or not it's a problem to have too many people from related departments out at one time. So they have their full time off request. They can view any pending requests. I'm not a manager. This is currently set with a filter so that it can only be seen by the person who is the manager. They can only see the people in their department requesting time off. It would show the person's name, what dates they're requesting, if they're requesting vacation or sick time, any eligibility alert or reasons that should be considered. It would be connected to the person requesting and have a spot for them to drop down, just select approved or denied. Same thing here, they would be able to view a list of all finalized requests. The final approval thing looks pretty much identical to that. It simply allows for the manager, the HR manager, to see only those who have been approved by their direct report at that point in time. He personally, the person running HR who does this, he likes to be able to see at a glance whether or not the department head had approved it, so this way he can see whether or not he needs to do second step approval there. So his is set up this way. He also has this giant list here in order to see who all needs review. You can see the eligibility alert here. I did turn everything back on so this way I could see it recently because he and I were going through and editing these so that they were a little bit more personalized to how he likes everything. But typically this would be turned off so that nobody else can see it. You would be able to view time off taken just for this year. That's an edit that we recently made because he was becoming overwhelmed looking at everything that was being done. And he could see the total days used. So this is what that view actually looks like based on what we were saying earlier. All right, let's go in and let's begin our actual build. I'm going to create a new space. We'll call this vacation per YouTube. I always prefer to add pages instead of inline databases. It just kind of makes it easier for me to keep track of everything. It also allows me to add more to each page than just a database. I open my page. In here, we'll name this PTO Eligibility. And now I can also type info about this page in addition to creating my inline database. Now, I love working in a wide page because, as you saw earlier, I use a lot of properties to make these things happen. So the more I can see all at once, the better. All right. Our first PTO is eligibility. I'm going to rename them PTO eligibility here just for the sake of the fact that it will be easier for me as I am working on this with you to distinguish it from the ones that I'm already using in this workspace for my actual job. PTO eligibility. We're also going to come back out to this page and we can create our second page, which will be PTO balances, and we'll do another inline, again at full width, and these two will work together to create our actual back end. Think of it as the computer, the brains behind the operation. In this PTO eligibility, the very first thing that we need are people's names. That's built in. The next thing that we want is a person property, and that is going to allow us to connect this to the actual person using our Notion workspace and what their proper eligibility and vacation accrual time is. While that's loading, I can show you here, these are kind of the base questions that I wrote for myself of how would I go forward with finding these things out. Well, I would need to figure out who's taking time off and how can Notion recognize them. The next thing we'll be asking is, are they full-time or part-time? Now, as you saw, my organization has different rules based on your part-time status, so we're going to need to know how many hours each of those things equate to. We have our person property here. We are going to select, and we will call this work status. Our work statuses can be full-time. We can do part-time 5 days. We can do part-time 4 days, and so on and so forth. I went ahead and did that without you just to save you some time. Here we go. Our first formula is going to be the number of hours worked. And we're going to edit our formula. I simply said if the work status is full-time, it's 40 hours. Part-time for 5 days is 35 hours. Part-time 4 days, 32. 3 days, 24. 2 days, 16. And 1 day, 8 hours. So I'm going to hit enter here. Now, if you do not have Notion AI, don't worry. This video is still for you. You're going to be able to use the formulas that I put here. If there are any changes that you have to make between your organization and mine, I promise you this is going to make it incredibly simple to figure out what you have to do. Let me hit pause until this formula figures its way out. This is basically what it did. It did an ifs function. It selected the work status property. Then it put in quotations the exact status that was available, the number that I want it to return. Went to the next line, did the exact same thing, all the way down. It hit 0 at the last line. Usually that just kind of is a true-false indicator. You would be able to take this formula, copy paste it directly into what you're doing, make any changes that are necessary. All right. So that's our first formula done. We're going to click out of here, and it has a blank value right now because no work status has been set. If I press full, it'll show my 40. If I press 4 days, 32, 2 days, 16. So it did exactly what I wanted it to. In order to start the ball rolling on our truly crazy calculations, there's some more information that our system is going to need. We need to know what was a person's hire date. So we can put in a date property. We can call it hire date. And I usually like to throw that right there around the person because it makes it easy. And then we need to know which days of the week do they work. For me, I find checkboxes to be easy. And Sunday. Monday. And I'll do the rest without you. Alright, so I've got all of my days of the week in there. Let me take a look at what our goals are here. We've handled who's taking time off, how Notion will recognize them, that's that person property. Are they full-time or part-time? How many hours part-time? And when were they hired? Now's when we start getting into a lot of these fun things here. Whether or not they've met an eligibility requirement, whether or not we're tracking the correct days, all of this sort of stuff. So this is where we're about to start creating a lot of different properties. Each one is going to be very specific in its use, and they're all going to build off of the next. It's going to be important that we have all of these available to us in order for things to work out the way that they do. So I'm going to show you what each of those are one at a time. We'll take it nice and slow, and let's take a look. Let's start by figuring out how many days they're eligible to take. We're going to add a property in here. As you saw with my other one, I had all of my days all the way over to the right. I like things to look similar. This way I can kind of keep track of what it is I was doing, why I did it. These now are pretty much all going to be formula properties from here on out. this is our actual vacation eligibility. I am actually correct in saying vacation eligibility this time around because we're going to have to calculate sick time separately. There are quite a few things that we're going to need to have in here, and in order to double check that everything I'm doing is correct, what I'm going to do is create a few blank pages here. We're going to have 2 people working full-time, one whose hire date was last week, one whose hire date was, you know what, we'll do more than 2 full-times. We'll do one whose hire date was more than 6 months ago. We'll do one whose hire date was within our little time frame of the 4 to 15 years, and we'll do somebody who has a date of about 20 years ago. We might even go earlier than that. Let's go 2004. We'll have all of those full times. Then we'll do a part-time 5-day, 4-day. I'm going to need a new page. 3-day, 2-day, 1-day. And this just gives me a way to track where everyone is. For these, I'm just plugging everybody in about 7 months to a year ago so that the number of hours they would receive in vacation time is equivalent to the number of hours they work in a week. All right, great. We have all of these in here. It's time to write our formula now that we have a reliable way to double check what it is we're doing. All right, we are going to say if hire date is empty, return 0. If hire date is less than 6 months ago, return 0. And since this is being a little bit slow, let me type this all out and get back to you. Here's what I did. According to the policies here, obviously if they don't have a hire date, there's no way to calculate, so return 0. But if they've been hired for less than 6 months, they're not eligible for vacation, so the system will also return 0. The handbook says that despite them reaching an anniversary at any day that's not going to be January 1, we typically don't work on January 1 being New Year's, regardless of their hire date, they are allowed to start taking their hours on January 1. So we're going to have to allot their hours to them on January 1, regardless of where their anniversary date falls in the year. The only way to ensure that includes everyone is by using December 31st. So vacation eligibility is to be determined based on their hire anniversary as of December 31 of this year. Then, if their status is full-time and their hire date is fewer than 4 years ago, return the number 12. If the status is full-time and the hire date is between 4 and 15 years ago, return 15. If status is full-time and hire date is 16 years ago or greater, return 20. Additionally, if status is part-time for whatever number of days and their hire date is less than 2 years ago, return the number in the hours property. If the status is part-time and the hire date is greater than 2 years ago, double the number in the hours property. Part-time dates should also be calculated as of December 31. All right, let's do this and see what happens. The AI here is very intuitive, very helpful. If we need to make any tweaks, we will be able to tell that to the AI and it will help us get to where we need to go. I'll give this a few seconds to run without you guys, and I'll show you what happens when we come back. Okay, so it says create December 31st of current year as the anniversary calculations. Great. Create the years of service as of December 31 this year. Also great. Create months from hire to now for 6-month eligibility check. All right. Check if status is full-time or part-time. Great. Return appropriate vacation days based on conditions. If no hire date, there's no eligibility. If the hire date is less than 6 months, then there's no eligibility. If full-time and years of service is greater than or equal to 16, then return 20. If it's greater than or equal to 4, return 15. If it's greater than or equal to 0, return 12. Part-time, hours times 2 if greater than 2, hours if greater than 0. That sounds great. Let's click off of here and let's see how everyone worked out. All right. Our full-time employee who has been hired for less than 6 months came up as 0. Our full-time employee who has been here for about a year came up as 12. All right, great. Each of our full-time dates look great. Okay, here is where I messed up. And this is why I like to put in all of the things. This is coming back in terms of days. So I did my calculation wrong. It simply needs to extract the number of days, not the number of hours. So we can go in and we can edit our formula. I messed up on the part-time calculations. Please correct so that if part-time, extract number of days. If hire date was greater than 2 years ago, double the number of days available to them. Part-time employees are also ineligible for vacation within 6 months of hiring. And the AI should take care of this for us. So let's see how it changes. Great. Okay, let's take a look here. And we have 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, and 1 day. And let's take a look at that formula just for anybody who is ready to copy paste that directly into theirs. Is part-time and years of service is greater than 2, part-time days times 2. Is part-time and years of service is equal to greater than or equal to 0, part-time days. Default to 0 if no conditions match. Great, fantastic. That is exactly what we wanted it to do. We could confirm as well by putting in any random part-time employee with a hire date of anything recent, and it showed up as 0. So all of our calculations are working exactly as we would hope. Great. Next item is that we are going to need to calculate our Sundays. Okay, so we're going to add in our property here. We're going to create it to the left. We are going to use a formula property and we will call it Sunday eligibility. All right, for this formula, we will say eligibility is to be calculated according to hire date, anniversary, is as of December 31 this year. for full-time employees who have worked less than 4 years, return 3. For full-time employees who have worked longer than 4 years, return 4. For part-time employees who have worked less than 3 years, return 1. For part-time employees who have worked more than 3 years, return 2. And I need to double check that because I do think that I just messed that up for the first 2 years of employment. Okay. And then for years 3 and beyond. So I think that I might have that wrong in the vacation eligibility. So we will double check that. I also need to tell it that all employees who have worked less than 6 months return 0. All right, let's see what it gave us. We have create December 31st of current year, years of service, months of service, select whether or not it's full-time. All right, let's take a look and see how everything worked out. Okay, so it is still showing that our employees who have worked for less than 6 months do have eligibility. So we have to go in and take a look at that. It still says employee, my full-time employee who has worked less than 6 months is eligible for 3 Sundays, and my part-time 4-day employee working less than 6 months is eligible for 1. Okay, so those are both corrected, but I do want to read that formula just to make sure that it is going to work for all people, not just the 2 cases that we referenced. You know what it was? I know what it was. We told it that it needed to do calculations based on December 31, at which point both employees would have been eligible. That's exactly what it was. All right, so we just have to be careful with that. Let's see here. 3, 4, 4. Everything seems all right from where I'm standing. The only thing that I'd like to double check is, let's say, what was their hire date? February 11, or what's today's date? May 16? All right, let's do May 15, 2024. Okay, great. So let's pop back over this way. Cool. So we have our Sunday eligibility that is up and running. Sick eligibility is going to be one of our easiest. We will insert a property to the left. It will be a formula. We will call it sick eligibility. And our formula will simply be if employee is full-time return 10 if employee status is part-time X days, extract X, and return that value. All right, all of our full-time employees are showing 10, and then we've got our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and our 4 again. Fantastic. Now we start getting into the real calculations that are based off of people's direct eligibility. Here's what we have on our full-scale version of this. We have hours, vacation, Sunday eligibility, sick eligibility. Then we have a roll-up, which is total days used. And we go from there into all of our remaining number of days. In order to do this, we're going to need to know what people have actually used. So it's time to start building our balances section, and we will be able to start doing all of our roll-ups and relations to connect these from that point. So let's go to balances. Now this section is completely unpopulated, so let's take a look at what we needed to ask ourselves for this. So who is taking this time off? How will Notion recognize them? Which dates are being requested? All right, that's an easy place to start. Let's do a date, and we can call this request dates. Nice and easy. How many actual PTO days is that? We're going to need to do a calculation for that. How many days are Sundays? Again, a calculation. Are they requesting vacation time or sick time? Nice and easy there. We will do a select. And we will edit our property to add an option. Our options will simply be vacation and sick. We do not allow people to request comp days. We allow their managers to handle that as necessary. So we can call this request type. All right, let's see here. Are they half days or comp days? That's nice and easy. We'll do a checkbox for each of those. Checkboxes are just nice, easy ways to create something that can be entered into a formula. There's essentially no work. It's simply just a yes, no. Comp day. We'll do checkbox again. I like using checkboxes because it's something you can kind of just hide away in property visibility. Nobody has to see it after a certain point. All right, was this approved by their manager? Was this approved by HR? Great, we can do a status, and for this we will do approval by manager. And we can do approval by HR, also a status property. For these, our statuses, we are going to want to change the basic properties here. We are going to want to make this not reviewed. We don't need an in progress type for this, so I'm just going to delete it. We need an approved. And we are going to need a denied as well. And we can make that some sort of red, orange, whatever we want to show that it was not approved and distinguish it from approved. All right, great. So not reviewed. And again, we're going to recreate these same ones with HR. So I'll do that and be right back. All right, so those statuses are set. Now let's tell the system what it's doing. So we're going to add a person property, and this person is going to be the person requesting. Then we need another person property, and that's going to be the manager. And we need another person property, and that is going to be the HR person. Now it should have some sort of clue as to what it's doing. Alright, thankfully for the most part, these formulas are pretty easy. So we're going to start with a formula that simply asks, is the request date that we're looking at this year? Or realistically, we're going to ask what year it is first, and then we'll do the this year second. So, formula. Formula is return year in request date. If empty, no date, otherwise format the year. So empty says no date. Let's put in a request date for this year, and let's also put in a request date for last year. Let's ask it to do another formula property here. And we should be able to ask it to format this in a checkbox. So, check if date is set in current calendar year. If so, check box. It did put in checkboxes for us, which we love, so that's super helpful. Let me go ahead and rename these. This is request year, this year, and one for next year. All right, check if date is in next calendar year. If so, check box. If empty, false. If year for request dates equals year now plus 1, then true. All right, none of my dates are next year. Let's go ahead and add one for next year, just so this way we can track that everything is working exactly as we want. All right, and there it is. It checked itself off for us, so that looks good. We're just about ready to move into our biggest calculations, but in order to do them, we are going to need to be able to reference which days our part-time employees are working. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say this is our part-time 5-day person, so they're working Sunday through Thursday. And then this is our 4-day person. They're going to work. How did my days get swapped around on me here? We'll go Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, the days swapping is something that I do see a lot when the AI creates these days for you, but I don't typically see them outside of that. So I am intrigued as to why I saw that happen. But my 4-day person will be a Monday through Thursday person. My 3-day is going to be a Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. My 2-day is going to be a Tuesday, Thursday. My 1-day is going to be Wednesdays, and this 4-day can also be work week for us. All of my 5-day people will be all 5 days. Now that we have those set, we can go back to our balances, and we are going to start getting into some of our bigger formulas that are being used for this process. Let's come over here. We're going to insert one to the left, and we'll start with the easier one. We're going to do a formula, and we'll call this Sundays used, and our formula is going to say if manager or HR approval is denied, return 0. If request type is sick, return 0. So this formula is for Sundays used. If a manager or HR approval is denied, return 0. If request type is sick, also return 0. If request type is vacation, count the number of Sundays within the request dates. Let's see. Extract start and end dates from the date range, calculate total days in range, calculate days until first Sunday from start date, count number of Sundays in the range. If approval by manager is denied, approval by HR is denied, request type is sick. Let's see here. All right, obviously we had not picked any Sundays for any of those dates, but let's give this a date range here. And actually, you know what? Let's give this a date range from the 14th to the 19th, just for the sake of our next exercise. Just as I thought, that did not work, so we're going to say view date or date range and count how many Sundays within request dates. I did just update our formula so that it only counts Sundays if approval by HR is approved, as I don't want to deduct Sundays from someone who doesn't actually get approved for using those dates. So all we have to do to test it is change our HR approval to approved, and there's one Sunday used. We need to create a new formula column. Okay, so this prompt seems fairly simple, but the result is going to be highly dramatic. So, count how many of the requested dates fall on the days the employee is scheduled to work, using the checkboxes to determine which week. I'm going to actually change that. No, which weekdays count is fine. Referencing, and I gave it the link to the database that includes a person's eligibility. If there is no eligibility record, fall back to counting companies' workdays Sunday through Thursday. Also, if final approval is denied, return 0. If half day is checked, return the half days. The thing that may not work with this is that there is no person property associated in both sides yet to create the proper link. This may come back and not work. If that happens to be the case, all we're going to do is go and add me in as one of these potential requests. All right, so I'm going to hit enter on this and see what happens. Okay, it says that it needs a relation to the eligibility database, which I was going to do after this, so we'll move that forward. For my own ease, we're going to come into this PTO eligibility. We're going to add my name, Rebecca PTO, to the one which I've added myself. Then we can come back over to our balances. When we come over to our balances, we can create a new property, and I'll put it towards the back here somewhere. And we'll just insert left. And this will be a relation property. All right, so our relation is with PTO eligibility. And it is a two-way relation. And yes, the relation can just be called PTO balances from the other side. Great. We have PTO eligibility here, and each one of these requests is related to me, so it's going to be related to Rebecca PTO. I can go ahead and do that for each of them. This establishes a permanent link between the pages as opposed to simply just offering it the URL that I gave in that one formula. So if we come back over to the eligibility page here, we can see that I have a PTO balances section here. Okay, so having this populated now, this does just say new page for each of my eligibilities, considering I did not bother to name those pages, but all of them are there in that relation now, so I should be able to make my days property. Back in balances here, we're going to go to days used. We're going to put this in here. Let's see what happens. Oh, and look how beautiful it is. We have a formula. Whether or not it works, different story. But we have a formula nonetheless. It did rewrite itself a few more times there. Landed here, it does say PTO eligibility is not a valid property, so we're going to have to take a look at that. Okay, so this was in fact a rather silly mistake that was preventing this days used property from working, and it was simply that I'd had a trailing space after PTO eligibility, so there had been a space that was here that I couldn't see, so when the system created that formula, it wasn't accounting for it, so it wasn't able to find a matching title. Anyway, we now have our days used property, so let's go back and look at that formula so that you can see what we did. So the system requested the dates, it viewed the start and end dates, it calculated the total number of days between, it looked at the eligibility records to see which dates were considered work days for us, it only included that number in the total of days, it checked through each one of the individual dates, it did its mathematical whatever it needs to do in order to somehow translate these dates into variables, subtract, add, whatever it needs to do, view whether it's true or false. It only counted days if the dates are approved by HR, which is why you'll see that the first two requests have 0 days used. And if it's a half day, if it's labeled as a half day, it's going to divide the days in half. So let's do this. You can see that it calculated 4 days used. If we look at our requests here, we see that Wednesday and Thursday are work days for me. Fridays and Saturdays are not. Sundays and Mondays are. It counted that there are 4 work days and one of them is a Sunday. Now let's come over here. Let's approve these and mark it as a half day. There you are. You have a half day. You have 4 days there. This one's not using any days because it's not yet been approved, and we don't want to deduct days that somebody may not be able to take. So that is most of what we need to do for the balances. We do have to go back and make a lot of calculations in eligibility, but everything should pretty much be easier from here on out. Now we're going to create a property to allow us to see total days used. We'll insert this again to the left of our actual weekday counter. This one is going to be a roll-up. So a roll-up works off of a relation to source info from another page. It doesn't just connect pages. It actually seeks information from the connected page. So we're going to seek an existing relation. It will search to see if we have any set up. We're going to use PTO balances. We're going to search that page for days used, and all we're going to do is sum all of the total days used. You can see I've used 4.5 total days. Nobody else has any person relation to the other page, so nobody else is going to have any time calculated for them. But here I am, I have 4.5 days. This would additionally include any sick days. And the reason that this is going to exist is for that view that we created with the bar graph that shows the number of vacation days as well as the number of sick days to see the total days somebody was out for the year. Next, we need to figure out the number of days that were used this year so that we can figure out the remaining days in an employee's balance. We'll start over here by creating a new formula, and we will tell it to sum all vacation days for this year approved by HR from PTO balances, ignore days marked as comp days. Great, this is the formula it returned. As you can see, it only has me marked for half a day because my 4 days are taken in 2027, my half day is taken in 2026, and the other time was not approved. And I've asked it to do the exact same thing for Sundays taken this year, so it should come back with 0 for results because I haven't taken any Sundays in 2026. And telling it to request all days from this year from that PTO balances page, sum them up, and make sure not to include any comp days, also only showing results that have been approved by HR. For the next 3 calculations, it's just going to be the vacation taken this year. That'll be subtracted from the vacation you're eligible for. Same thing, Sundays taken this year, which is subtracted from Sundays eligible, and same with sick. So I'm going to go ahead and do those without you guys here. This is the formula for all 3. Obviously, just replace the correct properties for each one. If you're planning on shrinking down your columns, you may also just want to reorder the words here so that it's vacation remaining, Sundays remaining, etc. This way, when you shrink it down, you just see Sundays are and you know what it is without having to open the whole thing. Alright, only 3 more calculations for the eligibility side here. The next one is going to show us how many vacation days they have requested for next year. So again, a formula, and we are simply going to ask it to sum all vacation days requested for next year that have been approved by HR, ignore any comp days. I'm going to do a micro experiment here, and instead of telling the formula creator to do exactly what I want it to do, I'm actually going to ask it to recalculate the vacation eligibility criteria as if it was 1 year further in advance. The fact that it sourced that information is deeply impressive to me. Now, it did happen to mix up some of my numbers here, so I am going in and going to correct each of those, but very impressive that it pulled over those different rules for me. So I am just going to fix that quickly. As you can see here that these days are not the correct number of dates based on my rules. Alright, here's the updated formula right here. Everything's working nice and neatly now. And I'll scroll back up just so this way you have time to copy anything you might need. And you can see right here that all of my days are in line. Now we need to calculate the short-term disability by finding the unused sick time from all previous years and capping it at 20. I'm simply going to use this as the prompt. This is what it returned. Because we don't have any previous sick days entered, it assumed that no sick days were used last year whatsoever and put everybody at the base amounts of sick days for them. Now, what we could have done if you're setting this up for the first time is use all prior years starting at such and such a date. That would essentially make it start from a specific date so that this is the rule going forward, but not necessarily active as of yet. The last thing that we have to do before we can move into all the fun stuff such as dashboards, views, buttons, forms, etc. is we need to go create our eligibility alert for the balances side to let a manager know if somebody is beyond their available number of days. So this is also going to be a formula that will bring back a text result. So let me type this up and I'll show you what I decide to do. I decided to start by simply telling it what type of alert I'd like. I have a feeling I'm going to need to workshop this. Here it is if you want to read it. This is how it came out, which looks way better than I expected. It goes through the eligibility reports, checks how many they have left, returns no PTO eligibility record found, or alert request exceeds remaining Sundays or vacation days. Same with sick days. Let's put in a request for 20 days for next year and see what happens. Okay, so I don't see any alert showing up, and I see why. The problem is that it doesn't see any days being used based on the formula we have, so we're going to have to tell this to go ahead of the days used to predict the number of days that will be used and see if that becomes more. I went in and told it that I needed it to be able to be predictive so that it would tell me, regardless of the days used calculation, whether or not it was going to put me over. And then it tried to adjust for what I requested because I made an incorrect request, and it tried to create a prediction as to whether or not something was within bounds so that the way the manager could see that. All well and good, you could absolutely keep something like that if you wanted. I don't feel that it's necessary to give my managers that much additional information. I only want this to draw their attention if something is wrong. So then I looked at it and I realized that all of my parameters were set for current year. So I went in and I adjusted and I said, I need you to be able to correct this within any year. I want you to be able to look at this year and calculate this year, and I want you to look at next year and calculate next year, and don't confuse the two. And it said, great, went in, gave me my alert down here exactly as I wanted, but up here it gave an alert and it said, please select whether this is this year or next year. So I went back in one last time and I said to it just that you can ignore previous years. Here is the formula it came up with. It's calculating the number of days based on PTO eligibility. It's checking if things are a half day. From there, it's checking remaining eligible Sundays, remaining vacation, remaining sick. It's going in and it's checking which type is it. It's going in and it's saying, here's the error message if these conditions are met. Now we have an alert. Request would exceed remaining vacation days. 11 days are available. 22 days are requested, and then my managers have everything they need to make an informed decision. We have all of the information out here. Just for the sake of ease, I am going to go in and put in Rebecca vacation 25, Rebecca vacation 26, Rebecca short vacay 27, Rebecca long vacay 27. And that will just help me reference while I'm in any other pages what exactly I'm supposed to be looking at and what I should be expecting. Alright, so we can go from here back to our vacation per YouTube. Alright, after about an hour or so, we have all of our main databases built. Everything is ready in order to run this system. So I'm gonna hit pause on this video at this time. I'm gonna make a part 2. In that, we will create all of our dashboards, all of our views, our buttons, our forms, automations, anything that we need now to make this system run. But I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope you were able to see how we took a framework and we were able to break it down into which parts we needed in order to create this system so that it would work specifically for the needs of our organization. I hope that you were able to take down some formulas or realize what kind of prompts the AI is able to be given, or recognize exactly how fluid the AI is. It's really helpful in that it takes feedback from you in live time. You can say that didn't work right and it will try rewriting the formula for you, whatever you need it to do. Notion did a great job with the way that they built and designed that. I've been very happy with it so far. I hope all of this was very helpful to you. I will see you again shortly for part 2, where we will make all of this work. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day.